Right. So, ladies and gentlemen, now we are moving forward with our next presenter, Michael Pang, and he's already with us. And Michael Pang is working as a managing director at Protiviti Hong Kong, and Michael is the practice leader for of the Hong Kong Technology Consulting and Digital Transformation Solutions. He's also the leader of Protiviti as Apex Security and Privacy Practice, and he possesses around 25 years of experience in advising top management on various strategic topics. And he's having an experience in data privacy protection, IT strategy, IT organization transformation, IT risk protection, and post merger integration and operations improvement. And he will be sharing his expertise with us on cloud security, working from home, security from home to enterprise. So let's get ready to listen from his interesting session. So, hi, Michael, how are you?
Hi, I'm good.
That's great. Thank you so much for joining us. It's an honor for us to have you here.
No problem.
I can perfectly see your slides, and you can
Great.
start your presentation now. Good luck. Stage is all yours now.
Okay, thank you. So, hi everyone. So I think the topic of the day is the work from home to enterprise. So in a nutshell, the working from home or even just COVID itself has actually created a lot of cybersecurity risks that we haven't actually seen before. Previously, before 2019, obviously we also have a lot of security risks, but I think the work from home and also COVID actually introduced more risk to us that I think our enterprises or actually our client will need to take care of and actually be a bit more mindful of. So I actually breaking up these sessions into 5 different parts. The first one is increasing in the phishing and ransomware attacks. I personally have probably double or triple the amount of phishing, some email that I received even comparing before the COVID situations. And more interestingly, just by self the remote working session, remote working, especially work using the VPN and so forth, also created a lot of new risk to us. I'll talk about that in a minute as well. The third item is about the introducing new technologies, because if you remember back in the 2019, 2020, when all hell broke loose in a way, that I think a lot of organizations are struggling to actually provide, cope with the new environment, new business process, or even new channel of doing business. And that are all the clean technologies being well understood in terms of the risks? I think the question is no. So I'll talk about that as well. The fourth item is more on the obsolete network architectures. This is not only because of COVID, but definitely COVID introduces, actually accelerated the obsolescence of network architectures. And that is actually very interesting sessions. Last but not least, I think it's very important to respond and prepare and respond and recover from cyber incidents are very timely. So I'll touch on that in a minute as well. So increasing phishing and ransomware, definitely the attackers adopting to remote working environment, because a lot of the people previously before the COVID are working in the office. They may not actually have a lot of access in email, and then I think that actually changes a lot. In the past, I mean, if an email was coming out from supposedly my colleagues on my right hand side or left hand side, then I can actually just turn my head and say, hey, did you send it to me? If it's no, then yeah, I know there's a phishing. And spear phishing as well, right? If IT is supposed to ask for my IT password through an email, I can just go walk over to the IT department or the IT desk and actually say, hey, is it from you? It's very easy. But now, especially for people who have not been working from remote working or working from home environment previously, this is actually very new to them. They might thought it is a norm to receive, if you work from home, receive email from IT to asking for all sorts of information. But in fact, those could be just spear phishing. And also that also introduced a lot of another element, which are the new technologies, not only in terms of the VPN, but also in terms of the PC. All of us using the company issues notebook or laptops. Sometimes the question is no. Then it's actually introducing if the PC or notebook itself actually have some virus or malware, it could actually affecting the organization's security as well. And even some of the detective controls or endpoint protection response systems might not actually fully operational in the new environment. So, and the attacker actually knows about it. So, if we remember previously at the very beginning of COVID time, time flies, almost like 2.5, 3 years ago. There's actually a lot of new phishing and malware attack. A lot of them are related to COVID situations. News about the COVID, about the number of people got infected. And I remember asking myself, if 2 years ago, 2020, at the very beginning, February, if there's a website or there's an email sending it to me saying that when all the people in Hong Kong are struggling to find a surgical mask, if there's an email saying that, well, there's a place to actually sell a lot of masks, yeah, most of the people will probably click on it. So this actually allowed a lot of hackers to capitalize the situations to their advantage. And I think a lot of typical situation is that a lot of the employees are not, I mean, who may not need to or know how to actually work from home, actually may not completely aware of the security awareness, right? They may not have the training or during hiring or annually. They may not actually know how to spot a phishing attempt because they probably never have to. And now that, and even some employees may not know, hey, I shouldn't use my home computer to actually process documentation, which is considered confidential, or even I don't supposed to use a public Wi-Fi. So if they don't know about that, then this can actually create risk to themselves as well as organizations. And that's why I think the training curriculum and training program has to update it in order to assume everybody will have to work from home and work remotely. More importantly, phishing and social engineering are not really protected completely from technology means, because a lot of them are really, especially on the spear phishing, mainly relies on the people's awareness to actually catch those effort of the email. Technology can support, but it cannot actually help completely. Ransomware, right? I think a lot of the questions, I think, is not about whether we will be attacked by ransomware. I think the question is how safe are we? I mean, the question in terms of whether the phishing can actually carry ransomware into organizations. Do we know? Would it actually explode? If it exploded, what is the cost, right? Can some of the core system can affect it or being locked down? Can a business be affected, right? Do we have to close our shops in order to, if we have ransomware affected? I think there are lots of questions in organizations' mind. Obviously, there are some ways for us to assess their readiness for ransomware. Governance assessment, more from a desktop, looking at a policy procedure on the recovery protections, similar, such as using the NIST and ISO as a reference, frame of reference, or using tabletop. A lot of people using tabletop to assess whether the organization knows how to respond to the attack, the ransomware attacks or other cyber incidents. As well as phishing simulations, right? Sending, I think most of organizations nowadays actually sending email phishings to see whether the employees can actually catch it. If not, their awareness has to increase. The last but not least is probably the ransomware purple team. I think this is a new concept, but we believe this is probably the best way, if not the only way, for us to completely know how ready are we during the ransomware attack. So it's covering the control assessment, desktop, and also phishing and simulation. It's basically put the organization really under the microscope in terms of if the kill chain of the ransomware actually happen in different stages, whether an organizations are actually ready or not. And we actually break down the purple team into different aspects, and definitely including phishing, because a lot of the ransomware are delivered through the phishing means. So the entire exercise will send the phishing email, even spear phishing email, social engineering scam to the organization, to the staff or the organization, to actually see whether, firstly, whether the technology can actually protect against the email, whether there is any filtering, if one person reporting the email, whether there's a security governance or procedure in mind, and also the technical controls to remove all the phishing. And spear phishing as well, to actually see whether awareness is actually in the right level to identify that is a spear phishing email. And then assuming that some of the staffs are really clicking the link, then the second step is really to actually identify whether some of the key system can be encrypted, what can be encrypted or not. Obviously, the ransomware, the simulated ransomware, will try to take controls into some of the systems and also spread around the network. And actually try to see whether the ransomware can actually get privileged access, because those will be the most dangerous information, that if the ransomware can actually get the privileged access. Then obviously that will actually that will be very important to actually see whether the ransom can actually increase some of the key system infrastructures. Assuming it can, right, with worst case scenario, then I think the question is going to be how to ability organization to monitor and contain the ransomware, because it's actually very important, because you want to be containing the ransomware into very limited systems. You don't want to be spreading around to all the systems, and also you want to have the monitoring to making sure that you know it as soon as possible, so that you can put a plug in some of the systems and containing the ransomware. And most importantly is the fourth and the fifth step in terms of how to respond. That would conduct both in terms of the tabletop, but since we already have the ransom steps, then we also can test the IT team to actually really choose to respond to the actual ransomware attack rather than just a tabletop. This becomes reality, and actually that actually puts the to put the pressures on the senior management and also IT team in terms of how to manage the incident response. And most importantly is probably the recovery, in terms of if some of the systems that got ransomed, then yeah, what do we do? Would the organizations and different part of the organization, HRs and mean and operation, do they actually know how to deal with it? Are there any recovery procedures? Are there any workaround? Do people just stand around and stare at each other and just don't know how to do it? And that actually becomes important, because you want to recover it. You want to ensure the business continuity and recover from the ransomware as soon as possible. So we believe these 5 steps are probably the only way for us to be sure, linking the phishing to ransom, the response to recover, and also business continuity. That's the only way for us to ensure that if an organization actually pass through entire purple test with flying colors, then yeah, that's the only way that we can ensure that we are ready for any ransomware attacks. And also, as I said, the second part is the remote working. Definitely, the organization has to adopt very quickly. We talked about 3 years ago when COVID was a very new thing. People just struggling in terms of what to do. So a lot of organizations I know actually have to deploy a lot of different technologies in a very rapid pace, right? A lot of, in the past, only a handful of people would need to have VPN or remote access. Now, no, everybody would need that, because most of the people, if not all of the people, have to work from home. People need to have laptop. People might have to use their own PC or own notebook. I think the questions is, firstly, the increasing use of access definitely will increase the risk, because of and this will be another way to actually comes into the internal network. And some of the IT team might have to use some of the secure technology and secure protocol, as well as even they're secure, they will definitely be some sort of risk introduced by the new technologies. I think the question is whether those new technologies have been well understood in terms of the risk. No matter whether it's conferencing software, cloud VPN, all of that has to be well tested before it should be used. But at that time, probably they don't have the luxury. So a lot of what are the typical issues? Some of the issues are multi-factor authentications are not being used because, I mean, sometimes it might not be a readily available technologies, or they may not be configured through remote access. And also, some of the remote access may not be managed by IT. So some they might not actually know who has been authorized or not authorized, and that means actually the control is being quite loose. And the external access is may not be intentional, right? So they might actually open up to some of the vendors or external party to actually come into the internal network without IT being notified, or without the entire risk profile being identified, whether those external access can get into the core systems or not. And definitely, I think the key point is sometimes security due diligence was not completed before the technologies was being added into the environment. And that actually has been a lot of the risk increase rationale reasons for my client. And similarly, I think the use not only in terms of remote access, because the COVID and even the remote access, remote working, introduce a new paradigm into the business world. So a lot of the business has to use new technology to cope with the new environment, new business process, even new services and new channels, right? In Hong Kong, for example, a lot of the restaurants are now used to be not care about takeaway. Now takeaway become their primary source of income. So are they using website? Are they using a third-party delivery or whatever? Or they actually use their own mobile app to do that. And that actually introduced a lot of new connectivities as well as internet, for example, Internet of Technologies. And that actually introduced new risks. Moreover, a lot of the organizations actually have to, because they don't have a choice at that time, they have to, working with third-party vendors, in order to actually shift, to deal with the shift in workforce and also the business environment. And that actually introduces risk because they might not have the time to do all the due diligence and risk assessments they should have done, both in terms of new technology and also the new partners and new vendors as well. Especially, they might actually share some of the company data or personal information to the third party that may not have the appropriate oversights onto the vendors. As I said, a lot of the issues are no security assessments was performed for the new system or system upgrade. Pen test also review was not done. I know a lot of the organization in Hong Kong or Asia Pacific are not really doing a lot of this, but definitely in terms of the COVID time, that the percentage of doing that even increased even more. We also see a lot of increasing of the shadow IT, right? Because IT and cybersecurity team was so busy at that time, struggling with all the kind of new technology requests. Other departments just simply go with the software as a service SaaS kind of model vendors, and IT was not involved and no supervision from cybersecurity team at all. So and it's going to be almost impossible to define what are the risk profile and whether those systems and vendors are safe or not. COVID also making the traditional security model obsolete, right? In the past, we're talking about the traditional network and the perimeter. Outside is dangerous, inside is safe. So that's why we need VPN. That's why we need less authentications when we are working in the office, more authentications when we're working remotely. But nowadays, no, a lot of people working remotely. So it's the traditional network security perimeter type of defense still apply. Also increasing the use of cloud as well, right? So in the past, all the systems are sort of internals and on-premise. So, okay, this one may not be making the security model applicable. Also, multi-factor authentications, actually, user identity and endpoint protections are actually much needed because people are actually maybe even overseas or using their personal computer, not the computer issued by the company. So to illustrate that, I think when we look at the left-hand side, when in the past you everything in the bubble, in the semicircle is safe, and everything outside is dangerous. So anything when you go to the web or you actually dial in on the outside, on the left, on the left-hand side here, then it's considered to be dangerous. So yes, in the past, there's also SaaS and IaaS model as well, but that's actually quite limited in terms of numbers. But so it's actually quite safe for organization to say, okay, whatever outside this bubble is actually dangerous. Whatever inside is safe. But now the modern network or the modern situation is there's increasing number of storage, SaaS and M365 and whatnot, and even increasing number of people actually working from home and remotely on the street at their home. So what is inside and what is outside, right? If a person using their own PC to access the SaaS systems or using the M365, what is inside and what is outside, right? That traffic or that connection actually literally never be inside. So it's actually all outside. So the concept of what is outside, what we call a castle and moat, is a concept is actually basically obsolete, right? It's impossible for the traditional network parameter architecture to protect against the new environment. So, and that was introducing the zero trust, right? Zero trust is a relatively complex. It's not a new thinking, but still a very complex philosophy. It's not something that one product can be. It's also good and bad. It's not just one product and can completely implement zero trust. But what zero trust is basically ensure the right people have the right access to the right resources in the right context, right? Basically, it doesn't matter where you are, doesn't matter who you are, you will have to go through authentication, right? Authentication can go ups and go downs, but it never be no authentication. So never relies on just parameter to assume trust. You basically will never trust and always verify. It depends on the profile and behavior and whether you're using your computer network, whether your user behavior is different from usual and whatnot. You actually might have more authentication or more verifications than in the past, but there will always be authentications. And even during a sessions, hypothetically, you're accessing something. If your computer is suspected to a zero-day attack or zero-day vulnerability, then immediately you probably have to authenticate, right, during your sessions or your EPLP. So that is actually a new concept of protecting your core assets, core resources. Rather than just going, if you allow coming to a VPN, then you can allow to go into the entire network. So the authentication becomes just by the server or by the network segment as well. So it is not a tool or a product. Some product may say they're zero trust product, but very rarely you can implement one product and voila, you become zero trust completely. It's not a project or the one time. It's almost like a philosophy. It's almost like a journey. It will have to sort of go on for a long time in order from where you are to fully become zero trust. It has VPN, it allows remote access, but it's not only about VPN and remote access. And it's actually require network segmentation and also multi-factor authentication as well. Some people would actually say, yeah, I have some of that already in my current network. Yes, zero trust is not about completely removing the current security controls and replacing a new one. Some of the existing controls, remote access, network segmentations, or even micro network segmentations, multi-factor authentications, those are already actually part of the zero trust element. So you just have to sort of increase that and actually add more elements into your defense in order to become zero trust. But one of the key things about here is to identify what are the data and what are assets, right? Because you cannot protect everything in the same way. It cannot be done in the past with network parameter architecture, but zero trust architecture is definitely no. So you need to actually know where the systems, where the assets, where the resources. You classify the sensitivity based on each asset, and then you kind of map where they are. Because you actually want to, because that also because of the segmentations on the fourth part, you want to group them together because you want to have the most sensitive systems or resources into one place so that you can group it into one micro segment so you can protect it more than other part of the segments where you probably have protection will be less. Then you deploy the segmentations gateway and also the control so that you know when to authenticate people and when to actually block people away from those segmentations. And then you define the least privilege access policy around those segments, and also define what has to be, what authentication are required. Some of these controls are not rocket science, has been there for a long time, but I think the concept of micro-segmentations, always authenticate, even you go into the network, even you're sitting in the office, you're supposed to be in a safer environment, you still be required to have the least privilege and also authentication before you actually go into the most highly sensitive assets. Last but not least, this one is not new, but I think it's still even more important in the COVID because things are changing as well as the attacks are being increased. Is the response, right? The response and containing nowadays, yeah, we talk about in the cyber sort of industry, talk about responding for a long time. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when you got attacked, so you need to prepare responding. Now it's even getting more pessimistic of it's not a question of how much you can respond, how quickly you can respond. It's a question of how quickly you can contain, because it's almost like there's no point of just responding without containing the damage. So almost like another, and that's kind of reason why the micro segmentation will be useful, because if one part of the network got attacked, you know it will. You just want to contain it within one small segmentation, and even to link it with the responding, containing with recovery. And I think the ransomware example that I just gave actually probably would be the best example. In the past, security and business continuity are very much two different topics. Now they have to link it together. But one important thing I want to say is incident response cannot be just planned. It has to be drilled. And desktop drill is probably one thing, but performing the drill as realistic as possible, similar to the purple team I just mentioned, probably would be the best, because people, if it's just desktop drill, people will just read it, they just read the policy. Yeah, I know. But in reality, when actually the moment comes, you have to know it like that, not just, yeah, I kind of understand, but I don't know what to do. So drilling is actually very important. So yeah, lots of different questions about this response and recovery, both in terms of the leaking, what data has been leaked, what the procedures, should I contact who internally, externally. More importantly, it's not about just the IT or cybersecurity's job. You have to involve the legal team, you have to include the PR team, the customer service team, the compliance team. All of that will have to be involved in order to completely respond to the recovery with cyber incidents. Also, recovery as well. Don't think about, yeah, I have the backup, that's fine. But if you have the system backup, if the data backup, do you have the server? Do you know when to get a spare server? Do you actually know how to? Do you know it will be successful to recover the systems and data backup into a new server to actually make it work? During that, how long would it take? And during that time, what should people do? Right? All the questions probably would not be identified if you simply just have a desktop review and say, hey, Mr. IT head, what would you do in this way? CISO, what would you do? It's very easy to say what would they do, but don't really trust them just to say that they know how to do it, but actually put the drill into reality to actually make that happen. Because during the cyber incident, it's not about just one incident and the attack is actually just like that. One more in time, you get attacked and you will respond. The attack actually go through different phases. You have the root cause, you have the hacker go into your first server, and then go into the second server, and go into the most valuable asset, and then you find out. So all of that actually is all very fluid as well, right? I mean, I have one client to say, basically, in the moment of his server, some of his server got ransomware attack, some of the server being encrypted, he has to make the decision. What would you do? Do you just pull the plug? Do you disconnect the network, or what do you do? There's no time to, let's think about it. Let me read the policy. Let's discuss afterwards. No, there's no time to that. So I'm not going to discuss all the kind of life cycle because I'm running out of time. But The important thing is at the moment in time, there's no time for you to think and no time to plan. So you have to look at the response. You have to know your response like the back of your hand. So that's kind of like all I have. Thanks, Serena.
Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for your wonderful session. It was really very informative, and I hope everyone here have enjoyed your session. Thank you so much for your time and effort you took to share your expertise with us. Have a great day. Thank you. Bye.